All right, so we are going to just truck right along. So Jennifer, here's the deal. While I try to figure this out, if you would give everyone a little bit of your background, and yeah, your background and kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight. And I'm going to try to figure this out. When you're done, if I don't see it, give me a thumbs up.
Okay, sounds good. Well, hello everybody. Great to be with you this evening. If anybody can't hear me, please put that in the chat. I'm going to assume that all participants can in fact hear my voice. Um, my name is Jennifer Ketterly. I am the Associate Director of Sports Performance at the Duke Sports Sciences Institute, and I'm also a board certified sports dietitian. And so I work primarily in the performance nutrition and sports sciences space. And happy to be here tonight to share a little bit about some of the nutrition topics and some of the big repeating concepts that I've seen over the course of my career, which spans 25 plus years, working with a variety of athletes and particularly tennis athletes at the Division I collegiate and professional levels. Um, and so again, I've seen some things that are just patterns in the tennis players, both males and females that I work with, and happy to share some of those eyesights with you guys tonight. And I will see if I can share my screen and get us rolling while Bill figures out his sound.
Okay, Jen, I still can't hear you. Sorry, but I love where you're going with this. Keep going.
I'm just going.
Oh, you're back. Gotcha.
You can hear me?
Yes,
Great.
I got you now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect, perfect,
Sorry, gang.
perfect. Well, I did a quick intro, and for those who may not have heard or just joining, um, we're going to talk about big nutrition related concepts for tennis, those that are recurring that I've seen over the course of my 25 plus year career in both youth, collegiate, and pro tennis players, males and females. Um, and I'm the Associate Director of Sports Performance over at the Duke Sports Sciences Institute here in Durham. I'm also a performance nutrition consultant working with teams and individuals outside of Duke as well. So I thought we would hop right in and go over a couple of big key concepts, and then we can dive into some Q&A if that sounds good with you, Bill.
I love it.
Perfect. Perfect. So the big three topics are fueling, hydration, and recovery. Okay, so that's if we're gonna zoom out, fueling, hydration, recovery. Those are the big concepts that we really got to tackle. Tennis players need to be mindful and have some strategies in all three of these buckets. And the reason that we want strategies in these buckets is because they actually do impact performance, and they can be a make or break item in terms of the whole preparation pathway. So these are important topics. So if we think about fueling, what now? Listen, we could talk an hour on any one of these topics, right? So I'm hitting treetops on these, and we can come back and dive deeper wherever y'all want to. Um, in terms of fueling, we need to think about the sources. Where is this fuel coming from? What source does tennis activities specifically require? Timing plays a role, and then just how much energy and how much fueling do we need, and is there a downside to getting too much or not getting enough, as it may be. So if we think about sources, this is probably one of the biggest areas that's just a constant point of education for all players, honestly, from youth to pro. It's something that I never stop talking about, which is the importance of carbohydrate energy in the game of tennis. Tennis is a combination, obviously, of high intensity exercise, but also a little bit of endurance mixed in there, right? And oftentimes we're doing it in the heat. And so I like to show this graph because this really demonstrates the importance of carbohydrate. So let me walk you through it. So down here on the bottom, Okay, on this axis, we've got exercise intensity. So this means 0 is, low intensity, 90% of our maximum, okay, is obviously high intensity, right? And then up here on the vertical axis, we have the energy expended, okay? So if we think about tennis, it's certainly not on the low intensity for most competitive athletes, and certainly the ones that tend to usually come through my door, right? These are going to be competitive players, elite players, pro players, anybody that's really trying to go somewhere with their game. Okay, we're not talking necessarily about just hitting balls with no purpose kind of thing, right? So we're talking about intentional training or match play. So if you look from this, let's take the 60. If you take a look at the 60 and draw a line straight up and down, you see that the percentage of energy comes, the majority of that, from 60% on, which is going to be moderate intensity, okay, is purple and green, right? The majority of that energy expenditure is coming from the purple and the green fuel sources. Those fuel sources are muscle glycogen and plasma glucose. Muscle glycogen is a fancy term for stored carbohydrate in the muscle. How much carbohydrate is stored or prepped in the muscle ready to go. Plasma glucose is what's circulating in the blood at any given time. So both of those combined, you can see as intensity gets higher and harder, the more glucose and more carbohydrate we use. And so what that means is it's rate limiting. So if you want to be playing in an intense situation or your practice or your game, obviously, that you're trying to win or your set is intense, you better have some carbohydrate energy on board, okay, and within reach, right? And this is why fueling during, which touches a little bit on our timing block there, is so critical, right? Because that plasma glucose, which is the green, is a big part of the fuel source for an intense type of activity. And so fueling every so often, keeping that blood glucose up through the food that we eat is a really critical fuel source. So that's a little bit of the science behind what type of fuel we need, particularly for a game like tennis. Okay. So I do like to show that and explain that because in our culture, there's just so much anti-carbohydrate out there, particularly with the weight loss and the peptides and everything but sports performance. Yeah, we're trying to watch those carbohydrates, but in the sports performance world, we need to understand them, know where to get them, and when to use them properly. Okay. And particularly as I said, with regard to timing, before, during, and after are going to be the key times that we want to make sure that we have carbohydrate coming in, or at least a strategy for it, right? And everybody's going to be a little bit different. We've got format, we've got type, we have the amount, all of those types of variables are going to apply to the individual. But in general, during play, so for every hour of play, we're looking for about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate coming in at the opportunities that we have, right? So changeovers are going to be really pretty key. The other caveat I always mention, particularly with tennis, that makes this a little bit more critical is that, as I said, oftentimes tennis is being played in the heat, sometimes extreme heats, for a long time. And so when we're working and training in the heat, we actually burn through carbohydrate energy a little bit quicker. And so the rate of utilization is much higher in the heat, particularly for glycogen. So that makes our preparation, meaning what we eat beforehand and on a back-to-back type of a tournament situation or tournament style play, what we eat afterwards, even that much more important. Okay. So as we look at making sure we get enough, this is a concept that I'd be remiss if I don't bring up. And I often am talking to athlete audiences. And so this is a really special opportunity to get to share some information to coaches. And so this concept of REDS it's key. It's something that I think everyone should be aware of. And RED stands for relative energy deficiency in sport. And this is a syndrome that can happen knowingly and often unknowingly to athletes of all ages, and all genders, all everything, right? Happens to anybody. And so what happens is that the amount of energy that we're expending is less, or is more, sorry, more than what we're taking in from a nutrition perspective. So there's a mismatch. There's a relative deficiency in the amount of energy that we're consuming as compared to what we're expending. The body can handle that every now and again, but when that becomes a regular pattern or a consistent underfueling situation, we have problems. The body can't tolerate that for very long. Okay. Research has shown us that males can tolerate underfueling a little bit longer than females. So females are pretty sensitive to these effects of underfueling. And so on what you see here is all of the impacts that underfueling has on performance. Um, just our training adaptations, recovery, cognitive performance, our motivation, right? Obviously, muscle strength, endurance, power, perform all things that are important to sports performance, and particularly in the game of tennis, because you have a blend of power and endurance. And so I, again, wanted to bring this up to say this is a thing, it's a concept that we need to be aware of, and that when we see issues in any one of these areas, it's a really good time to take a closer look at, okay, is this player fueling adequately, right? Do they have enough energy on board to get through a practice week going into a tournament weekend, or whatever the case may be? Earlier we see it, the quicker we can address it and reverse these problems. But the longer that this goes, some of the health related issues that can happen affect hormones, and physiologically affect um, everything here that's a plug-in to these performance outcomes. So again, wanted to make you aware of that. And this is a perfect time when you as coaches are noticing some of these decreases, whether it's power on the serve or on the return, recovery issues, any of these, let's get a closer look. Let's get this athlete plugged into, whether it be a really good sports dietitian, or at least your sports medicine professional, to kind of have a conversation about it, right? Okay, so that's our fueling. Sources, carbohydrate is really, really key and important. Timing before to prepare for match or practice. During every hour, we want to have a good carbohydrate source coming in, 30 to 60 grams. Ideally, that's a simple carbohydrate. We don't need to worry about, avoiding sugars at that point. Sugars are good at that point, particularly during. We want simple carbohydrate forms going in as fuel source. It's getting chewed up very rapidly. And then
Jen, would you
being
would you just give us a couple of examples of those, maybe three or four examples of good ones to use?
Sure, and this can be fruit, right? A lot of people will just use a banana. You could use it, and this is where it comes in. This is where we can customize for the individual, right? There's no wrong answer here, right? In terms of there's no magic bullet food, right? But something simple. Everybody's digestive system is going to be a little bit different, and so if it works, it works. When I was at the University of Georgia, some of our players would eat, sub sandwiches at the changeover. I mean, hey, if your gut can tolerate that, great, right? But anything that's going to be like an applesauce tends to work really well. A banana, this is where your sports foods come in, right? The sports gels or the chews. Sports drinks also are going to be crucial at those junctures, because they're a combination of not only hydration, but also that simple carbohydrate, which is your fuel source. A lot of athletes like to use dates or date-based products that are made into little chews or bites. That's fine. Um, so again, there's a range of anything goes here, right? There's no magic. It can be as simple as uh, oyster crackers, if that's what works for that individual, right? So again, lot of room for discovery in terms of what works for any individual. The goal here is have a strategy. Have a strategy. Okay. So our second big bucket topic here is hydration. And this is so critical, particularly to those, again, playing in climates at which it's warmer, hotter, um, and certainly in some of our professional global tournaments, sometimes extreme. So I think about hydration, um, you know, it's very personal. It needs to be prescriptive, ideally, and it's certainly preventive. Okay, what do I mean by that? So personal meaning that a good hydration plan really goes and speaks to the individual's needs. Everybody's sweat rate's going to be different. Everybody's electrolyte needs are going to be a little bit different. Everybody's practice strategies in terms of their training blocks and how hard they're going on any given day is going to be different. So there's no one size fits all, and ideally we can get down to the person and figure out what should make up that strategy. Prescriptive. Prescriptive means there's some ways to figure that out. So for example, what I recommend athletes do is make sure that on your really tough days, at least, okay, on your, and most athletes know which day of the week is sort of their tough days, or their high volume, high intensity days. So take one of those days that's representative of your training and typical or average, and weigh yourself before and after that practice. And ideally, this is in like compression shorts and a sports bra for ladies. Um, and we don't really care about the scale accuracy here. We're looking at the change because we're going to weigh ourselves before, and then we're going to weigh ourselves after that practice, right? So we're going to towel dry off. We're going to, again, get back down to those compression shorts or, shorts and sports bra, and we're going to weigh ourselves again and look at the difference between those two numbers. We don't care about the numbers. We just care about the difference, because the difference is going to be how much water the player lost during that practice session. And so if you do that once or twice, you now have a sense of my sweat rate, meaning that if you lose 2 pounds, and you typically lose 2 pounds on that type of practice, you want to know that. You could also be a player that loses 6 pounds, depending on your environment. So it really varies. And this sweat rate is not something that you can guess by looking at a player. It's not something that is categorically assigned, meaning, if a player's this tall and this weight, they generally lose this amount. It's genetic, it's individualized, and it's just a good exercise to do to, again, have a sense of what that sweat rate is so that you can then have a rehydration prescription. So for every pound lost, you want to take in at least 12 to 14 ounces afterwards. And so knowing what you need to put back is key. The other thing we can do with that pre and post weight is to figure out, did that player lose 2% of their body weight in fluid or not? And the reason that 2% is key is because that's the point at which hydration starts to affect speed, strength, stamina, and performance indicators. So the goal here is to drink enough during a session to lose 2% or less of your body weight during that training session. Okay. So hopefully everybody's following me there. So you don't want to lose more than 2% of your body weight, because if you do, that person is at risk of being affected by the performance decrements related to hydration. The closer we get to 3 and 4%, we start to get more concerned about some of the safety related issues with regard to hydration. And so on up the ladder we go in terms of severity. So we've got performance at the 2%, 3 and 4 start to get into more of the safety related issues, the thermal heat stress. Okay. So from a preventive perspective, again, we obviously can prevent muscle cramps, we can prevent performance declines. And I say to our athletes, this is a controllable factor. This is completely controllable. You can't control your competitor and how they're playing that day, but you can control your hydration plan and your strategy. And if you've stepped onto the court well hydrated or not. Right? This is a complete controllable that does have direct impacts on your performance. So this is a really good topic to make sure is being addressed within your teams, and have some basic understanding of hydration individually, and then certainly as a team, making sure that this is either provided for, or that players are coming prepared with their own hydration solutions, etc. Okay. So when we think about hydration, we've got to remember at the core, it's supporting our cardiovascular function, which is why when it gets low, our body has to downshift. Power, speed, strength, stamina, all that has to downshift if we start getting past that 2% dehydration point. Okay. Again, it also regulates body temperature. And as we mentioned, once we get to that 3 and 4% and beyond, losses of total body weight due to water loss, we start to get into risky territory there, right? And then performance we touched on. Okay. Well, let's hit recovery briefly here, and then we can jump into some Q&A and go from there. So recovery is a huge topic of conversation these days. There's recovery strategies from a nutrition perspective that can be talked about in depth. There's also a lot of recovery modalities these days that are available. But today, in terms of our conversation, if we focus on what are some of those key nutrition related recovery concepts, we first start with the rehydration. So this is post play, post practice, post match, you name it. Immediately, we're going to want to have that idea of generally how much I need to put back based on how much I lost. Okay. So again, and typically a nice rule of thumb that's really can make it concrete for athletes is that for every 2 pounds that they lose, if they put back one of those green Gatorade bottles, everybody knows how much those are. Everybody probably has one sitting under their kitchen sink, right? Athletes, for the most part, know what that bottle looks like, what that feels like, and how it feels to drink that much fluid. Right? So for every 2 pounds loss, one of those green Gatorade bottles. So rehydrating within, and you want to make sure that body weight has restored before the next session, ideally. Okay, so that's within 24 hours. The athlete wants to eat and drink enough to get that body weight back to baseline. Okay, where we see this often get athletes is that, let's say they lose 3 pounds in a practice, and their normal eating and drinking habits will replete them 2 pounds. Okay, so they're still -1, but no big deal, right? That's not that much. But they do this 3, 4, 5 days in a row. And so at the end of the week, going into a tournament or travel, now we're cumulatively down 5 pounds. Okay, so hydration is not just a 24-hour conversation. We have to remember that those losses can be cumulative over the course of a training week or a tournament. And so rehydration becomes a daily priority. Okay, refueling. We already talked about fuel and how carbohydrate is central as a fuel source for the game. And so we do have this concept of if, okay, this is if we are wanting to recover and restore our energy sources because we have another match, training session, workout, you name it, within 24 hours. So so if there's no day off, this is not as important. But if we've got something tomorrow, then we want to make sure that within an hour, we've got a good carbohydrate source coming in that's at least equivalent to your body weight in pounds. Okay. And that's because the muscle itself has these, what I tend to term as kind of these delivery trucks, right? And they come from deep inside the muscle, they come to the surface, and they'll grab that carbohydrate that the athlete consumes and then deliver it back into the muscle. And that's a very efficient process, but only typically does that very well within the first hour, maybe hour and a half after play. Okay, so when we think about timing and recovering energy in the game of tennis, if we've got something coming up the next day within 24 hours, and most certainly if we've got multiple workouts in a day, this timing of carbohydrate intake within an hour after becomes a key step. Okay, repair is kind of a two-parter here. When we think about repairing, this has more to do with the workout periodization and the type of strength building and work that athletes are doing. And so assuming that there is some strength work and there is, again, repetitive stress on the athlete from a training perspective, we do want to take into account that protein is important. And so this again looks like athletes having good protein sources coming in every 3 to 4 times through the day. So that's every 3 to 4 hours typically. Okay. And so what we don't want is the athlete strength training and not having had a meal for 12 hours. We don't want the athlete strength training or doing a intense training block and not eating for 2, 3, 4 hours afterwards. Okay, with regard to protein, we want to sandwich that workout with a little bit of protein, and that what that does is that helps the muscle continue to work and repair instead of break down. Okay, so protein timing can be important there, as we look to build the athlete and those adaptive responses over time. And the last piece there is certainly rest. And a lot of athletes tend to skimp on rest because maybe they're doing, an early morning workout, then heading to maybe class or academic work, and then coming back in the afternoon for some court work. But will skimp on their sleep piece thinking, oh, I've got to get all this in the day, which it can be a challenge, right? It can be a challenge, but from a recovery perspective, that 7 to 9 hours is so critical to the body. In fact, the recovery and repair process happens, and that adaptation to training happens mentally and physically, happens at night while we're sleeping. And so athletes that are getting 5, 6 hours of sleep regularly, that's a problem. That's a problem because their long-term recovery trajectory is going to be blunted. And a lot of things happen in that nighttime period that help the body to repair and recover. And that has to do with just physiological processes that turn on and off at nighttime. Okay. So things like growth hormone, things like anabolic hormones, they go to work to repair and recover during that nighttime phase. And so rest becomes a pretty big R in recovery. And this is what we call the 4 R's of recovery: rehydrate, refuel, repair with protein, and rest. Okay. So, with that, I think I've hit on some really big topics and some key points in each of them. So, Bill, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of questions already that have come across. First one, water versus Gatorade sport drinks for tennis hydration.
Mhm. Great question. In fact, I was hoping someone might ask that.
Yeah,
So, in terms of hydration, a lot of people think that we just need water. And when we think about sweat, well, first of all, if we think about why we're rehydrating because we're losing fluids through sweat. And when we sweat, we certainly lose water. That's the main component, obviously, but we also lose electrolytes. And this electrolyte composition that any individual loses is going to be highly just that, individualized. And so, for example, I will do sweat testing on athletes, particularly our elite athletes, professional athletes. So I will end up with a sweat profile for that particular athlete. Okay, and this is something that athletes can do on their own. There are some commercial products out there, and Gatorade is one of those brands that has made this. Has taken the method and made a commercially available patch that can help you get in the ballpark of what this electrolyte loss looks like in any given athlete. And that's called the GX patch, sweat patch. So the Gatorade GX sweat patch is something you can buy online. It used to be that you could buy it at Dick's Sporting Goods. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but certainly online. And it's very cost effective. It could again get you in the ballpark of how much am I losing here? So when we think about what's coming out in your sweat, sodium is by far the biggest contributor to the electrolyte losses that any athlete would have. Okay. And so when we think about volume, we're the average. Okay, this is the average. So we've got a lot of plus and minus to this, but the average loss is about a liter, which is 32 ounces per hour. So think about that. That's the green Gatorade bottle. Green Gatorade bottle is 32 ounces. So 1 liter of fluid lost per hour. And then that the sodium that could be lost in that could be anywhere from 500, 2,000 plus milligrams. Easy. And so depending on, again, if the athlete's a salty sweater or not, we're going to want to have an electrolyte strategy. At the end of the day, though, if anybody's playing with any intensity and any type of duration longer than an hour, you're going to want an electrolyte solution as a hydration beverage. Okay, so this is where sports drinks come in, right? They're the trifecta. They're the fluid, they're the energy because it has a little bit of the simple sugar in it, and it has the electrolytes, primarily sodium, right? Potassium, magnesium come in, but trust me, they are a distant second to sodium. So sodium is really the key. Okay, so sports drinks like Gatorade are formulated based on this data and averages. And so if I'm a player and I'm choosing between water or a sports drink, and I'm practicing 60 minutes or longer, moderate or higher intensity, I'm choosing a sports drink.
okay. What if we wanted to make our own sports drink, our own Gatorade? Are there some ingredients that you'd say, look, because some of them are a little too sugary, right? And we got to kind of be mindful of that. If we were going to make our own, what would you put in yours?
Well, this is where you can play mad scientist, right? So, you're going to put some type of a carbohydrate or a sugar in there. So sugar, but you don't want sugar substitutes at that point. You don't want stevia. You don't need anything that's not contributing energy. Your body needs that carbohydrate energy, right? And so again, during play, every hour, that's when we want to have these sports drinks. The problem in and the sports drinks have gotten a bad rap because people drink them while they're sitting on the couch playing video games, right?
Right.
That's not a time when we need it, right? But when we're playing, again, an hour or longer, moderate to higher intensity, particularly if it's in the heat, there's really not that much sugar in a typical sports drink, Gatorade, Powerade. There's like 16, 18 grams, okay,
Okay.
so that's really not that much. Again, when you think about the requirement, the rule of thumb is 30 to 60 grams per hour. So, again, what goes into that? It's some type of simple sugar, whether it's I'm adding it or it comes from a juice. I'm adding salt and I'm adding some type of a fluid. Okay. Some of
Okay.
these ones that are made with coconut water, right? Coconut water is by default very high in potassium. That's great, but it tends not to be really efficacious for an athlete because, again, the electrolyte that is lost in sodium far and above any other is sodium, salt, right? So nothing
Right.
wrong with a little potassium, but if you go with the coconut water based sports drinks, you're going to want to make sure that it's the version that has the added sodium in it because by default they don't.
Okay. So if you made your own, then I could maybe throw in some water, some coconut water, some kind of simple sugar, and then maybe a flavoring packet of some sort, right?
Totally. Yeah,
And I'm off and
absolutely.
running.
Yep. And there's lots of recipes online for homemade sports drinks. It certainly doesn't have to be a commercial one.
Okay.
The commercial sports products are just convenient, right? They're
Right.
convenient and ready to drink, made to be ready to drink to pull off the shelf and go. But all of these nutrition and hydration related strategies can be done with whole foods, 100%.
So do you have one that's a commercial one that maybe is a bit under the radar? Because we all know Powerade, Gatorade, but is there somebody else out there that you're like, hey, you might want to check these people out because they're really good?
You know, I really don't. I'm not. I don't really tend to be brand specific. I work with athletes in terms of what they like, right? Some like a flavor profile of like a watermelon juice. Some like the coconut water flavor because that just works better with their palate. And so this is another case of at the end of the day, whatever works for them and what they feel like they would like to drink in those moments, it is all very different.
Right. All right, so coaches, remember you've got an expert here with the Duke son behind her name, so you know she's up there, and um, we got to hit her with these questions because you don't want to miss this opportunity. So while you're thinking about that, Jennifer, I've got another one. One of our struggles tends to be getting our female athletes to just to eat enough because inevitably they're always like got their mind on, well, I need to lose a pound or 2 pounds or 5 pounds, whatever, right? So they're always trying to lose a pound or two, and we struggle to get them to eat in general, but then eat enough. Do you have some suggestions for an old coach?
It's a really big topic there that you're bringing up, Bill. And I will say I agree with you that I've seen that time and time again. And I will just point out that anytime there's an athlete that in their mind at any given time says, I want to lose 1 pound, 5 pounds, whatever the case may be, there's this idea of cognitive restraint. And so if that athlete is thinking they want to lose that weight, they are by default cognitively restraining what they eat at every plate and at every turn. So what that leads to is underfueling at every corner. And so how do we fix that? We fix that by a good, sound foundation of education around when is the best time to manage my body weight. Let's have some intervention on what that looks like, how it should be done. Let's hopefully have a professional walk with you through that journey to do it safely. Let's talk about the things that matter, which is most likely your performance on the court. And how do we maximize that? How do we stabilize your body weight? Let's have a plan of when to work on it, right? At what time of the year. And then let's have some good conversation about what is a good target playing weight for you. And so when an athlete is solid in those ideas of this is my target playing weight this season, here's when I'm going to try and reduce if I need to, X or Y time of the year, and this person's going to help me do that, that frees up their mind immensely, immensely. This is why we now have at most, I mean, gosh, I'm going to say for sure Division One, most Division Two, and now starting even, many Division Threes will have a consulting dietitian come in to help lay some of this groundwork and give you all as coaches some help with this stuff, right? Because this becomes the competitor that you can't play, right? If you don't
Right.
name.
All right, so I've got another one that came through here. You hear about the chocolate milk and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich after the match. Is it true? And if it is, why is that such a good combo? And is it only after the match or is it more before? I'm assuming not during, but tell us about the whole peanut butter jelly chocolate milk combo.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's start with the chocolate milk. It's a great question, and it's been out there for a long, long time, probably 15 or more years at this point. I remember when that study first came out with the chocolate milk. I was working at the University of Connecticut at the time, and that actually is still held true. And so, milk, first of all, is a great sports food. Okay, so why is that? So, milk has a ratio of carbohydrate to protein that's really nice. But the protein in milk or dairy, so cow's milk dairy, so not soy milk or not, oat milk or almond milk, but cow milk dairy, the protein in that is whey protein and casein protein. And I'm sure 10 out of 10 people on this call have heard of whey protein, right? Whey protein is a phenomenal muscle builder. It's a solid source of protein, very high biological value. So just a very good source of protein all around. And so milk has that naturally. And that's where we get whey protein supplements, right? From dairy. And so that's the natural whey protein, first and foremost, from a repair standpoint. Remember, we talked about recovery. So repair is protein. And then the chocolate milk, what that does is it boosts that carbohydrate to protein ratio to about 3 to 1. And that's about what we want. We want 3 times as much carbohydrate coming in as we do protein, again, because we're replenishing that energy, that muscle glycogen that we just used out on the court. And so the chocolate flavoring could be strawberry too, right? Or anything. But that simple carbohydrate, simple sugar in that milk that gives it the flavoring is helping us to regenerate and hit that 1 hour timing window on refueling energy. Okay. So that's kind of the chocolate milk story there. So it's naturally formulated to be a great recovery beverage. And athletes love it.
Yeah.
Most kids love it. And so it tends to be a good choice, but doesn't have to be the only choice. The nice thing about it is it's widely available. You do want to choose the low fat version though, in this case, right? You don't want it to be a full fat version of chocolate milk in the recovery window because fat will slow down digestion and absorption of both the protein and the carbohydrate. And recovery is about speed. We want that stuff getting into our body pretty quickly, right? And so that's that. Peanut butter and jelly, kind of a similar type of, I would say, post, depending on how thick a spread that peanut butter is. You've got your bread, which is your carbohydrate source, and then a jelly, which is also a simple carbohydrate type of a source. So again, that's just adding to that good energy. You're going to get a little bit of protein in peanut butter, but not a ton. And so I wouldn't gob the peanut butter in the post period just because that's going to slow, again, that's going to be a little bit higher in fat. It's a good quality fat, but it's going to slow the digestion down. But prior to, right, an hour to 2 hours before, that's a great food to have before match or play.
Okay.
Right.
All right, so we got another one. How about protein shakes? Give us your take on when, where, and how, and maybe what's in them.
Yeah, protein shakes are big in the marketplace because of all the research that has come out on the repair and recovery process and how much protein is central to that concept. And so we know that about 25 grams of protein tends to be the sweet spot for most people in terms of general repair. And so when you look at protein shakes, they are formulated most often to be about 25 plus or minus a few grams of protein per bottle, ready to drink container. And so again, it comes back to these are convenience foods, right? And so if an athlete, for example, is training. There's, say, a 2.5 hour, 3 hour training session in the afternoon. And then, say, could call it collegiate setting, then afterwards has to go to some type of academic meeting or study sessions, things like that. And they aren't going to be sitting down to eat dinner for, say, 2.5 hours. Well, we want to make sure that they have a protein shake because they're walking out the door at the facility and I can give them this ready to drink protein shake, high biological value protein at the right amount, tastes good. They can drink it, walk out the door, hit their recovery protein need, and be done with it, go on with their way. So again, nothing magical per se about the actual formulations of these protein shakes, but they are convenient if you have somewhere to go, someplace to be, and you can't or aren't able to, for any reason, get a meal within a couple of hours, right? Post workout. I also think protein shakes tend to be really beneficial, maybe more beneficial for a lot of athletes in the morning. Okay, because that morning, what I've seen, and this goes across all athletes, is that protein intake tends to be okay at lunch, good at dinner, terrible in the morning. Terrible in the morning. It's either non-existent or not enough. Okay, and
Right.
so typically a ready-to-drink product that can grab and go because I'm short on time for whatever reason. I've got class to run to, I've got a workout to go to, whatever the case may be. I'm not taking time to make a breakfast or I can't tolerate it. And so these ready to drink protein shakes can be really beneficial. But a smoothie could be just as good there too, right?
Yeah. So if you were going to make your own protein smoothie, what would you put in it?
Gosh, that's the fun part. Again, depending on the taste and flavor profile you like, you think about a base first, so a liquid. So you pick a liquid. Apple juice goes with anything. Okay, so you can use that as a carbohydrate source. A lot of people will use a little bit of milk to get that extra protein in, plus a 25-gram scoop of protein. Or if I'm not buying a protein powder, I can use a Greek yogurt, right? I can use maybe a cup and a half of the ultra filtered milk plus one of the like Chobani cups or Oikos or whatever off the shelf of Greek yogurt, which is tends to be somewhere between 15 to 20 grams of yogurt. And then I'd throw some frozen fruit in there. Berries, you want to go tropical, go vanilla tropical, and you got that kind of flavor profile. You can do the berries to get more of a cherries and berries. You can do a lime, cherry lime. You name it. You can get
Yeah,
really fun with that. But base, frozen fruit, and a protein source, that's your recipe.
awesome. All right, so we're getting kind of close to the end. Jennifer, if let's say I've got a match tomorrow at 1 o'clock, what are we eating? And warm-up's at 12. What are we eating and when are we eating it to be ready for that 1 o'clock match?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question and a common one. And so our rule of thumb is that the further out that meal is timed from the start of your activity or your play, the more mixed it can be, the more mixed meal you can have. For example, 4 hours out is typically as far out as you want to go. And if you're 4 hours from your um, event, then you can have a mixed meal. So carbohydrate, protein, low fat, you name it, like a typical meal,
Okay.
right? As you get closer, so say let's cut it in half, 2 hours. So 2 hours before. Now I'm going to shave out the fat. I want it to be a low fat meal and lower in protein and more focused on carbohydrate. Okay. And so certainly when we get within 0 to 2 hours, now we're looking at almost exclusively a carbohydrate type of a meal to you think straight up pasta there. Whereas you get to 2.5, 3 hours, you're thinking chicken pasta, maybe a little vegetable. You're looking 4 hours, you can do salad, vegetable, carbohydrate, starch source, and a good lean protein. Hopefully that kind
Okay.
of
So
makes
so
sense.
right before we go on, we can grab a little pasta bowl, maybe some pasta salad, knock back a little bit right before we go to play, and it's gonna give us some energy.
Oh, 100%, absolutely. And I will say, let me bring this up, Bill, before we go, because I think this is a great visual here. And if coaches haven't seen this, this is worthwhile to see and share.
While you're bringing that up, I had a coach ask, "Is Ben and Jerry's PB&J okay?"
Oh man, absolutely. Celebrate away, my friend.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure we got that for him.
We gotta have our fun foods too, don't we?
Yeah.
All right, give me 1 second here. So these are called the athlete's plates. Okay, so the athlete's plates are designed to be visuals, and they were designed for the United States Olympic Training Centers to be, and they're at the training tables and designed to be a visual to help our Team USA athletes know how to build their performance plate as they go through the training table. And so there's three of them. Okay, there's an easy day, a moderate day, and a hard day. Okay, so let's pull those up. Let me share. And you can Google these and they should come right up. They've been around for quite some time. Um, so the athlete's plate is just a great visual of what that plate should look like. And this is like a hard training day. So hard training day, again, higher intensity. You're, certainly going longer than an hour, probably longer than an hour and a half, looking at, those longer, higher intensity sessions. And what you want to focus in on here is the proportion of food on the plate for each situation. So for a hard training day, you've got this starch portion is half the plate, right? Because again, this is the primary fuel source for most sports, most sports. So, and this goes for, race day or competition day too, which we just touched on. So half the plate carbohydrate, and this would be for 3 hours out, right? So if we're talking about pregame meal, 3 hours out, mixed meal, like we said, got food group, all food groups are represented here, right? So we got our starches, half the plate, we got a little bit of veggie, and then we have our lean, low-fat protein, but that's only a quarter of the plate. Okay, so contrast that with our moderate training day, which might be more like your hour and a half, kind of typical sessions. Not your peak day, but not your super light day either. So you can see how that the grain or the starches have changed. It's no longer half, but it's still about a good, what, third, right? A little bit more than a third. And we add veggies. That part increases a little bit, and lean protein stays the same. Lean protein stays the same. Okay, and then in the easy plate, the carbohydrates shrink even more, and so those are your plates. So it's just I think it's a nice educational tool so athletes can see what a plate looks like as they're building
Yeah.
that plate and thinking about, what should I have and what's that mix of food what should it be?
Well, Jennifer, this has been a lot of great information. I've enjoyed it. I've been taking notes as I'm going along here as well because I want to be able to transfer this over to our athletes and help them as much as I can. So thank you so much for being on with us tonight, and for all the coaches that are watching as well, either now live or in the future here. Appreciate all your information and just being a part of what Sport Field Life is trying to do. So. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And please feel free to reach out to me if anyone has follow up. You can find me at Duke or Jennifer Ketterly at gmail.com. And happy to work with your teams. And also at the Duke Sports Sciences Institute, we love to welcome in teams or groups of athletes to do athlete performance testing and batteries of assessments for you if that's something you're interested in. But we'd love to have you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.